All right, welcome everybody. Hello, hello. Give everybody a few minutes to get gathered here today. Special edition debate and 9/11 conversation. Today is 9/11, the year of our Lord 2024. A lot of things to discuss here today. Big Memorial Day, 23 years ago, we went through 9/11. So I'm just going to give everybody just a few minutes to gather here, and then we will get started. We won't be doing any financial coverage today. We'll certainly be doing that in the next couple of days. And if you're available online, we have a workshop coming up for my old employer tomorrow as a consultant from the outside and doing a macro breakdown there. I think it's going to be very interesting, very good information for everybody. So I'm going to pocket that for today. And then also next week, if you're interested, we're doing a Bitcoin breakdown for another investor conference, which I believe is free for the general public. All you have to do is put in your email and phone number for the provider, and they will make sure that you are involved and there. So we are up and live and running. Hey, Rachel. All right. So we will get started here today. Again, the core topics we're going to talk about here today are going to be the presidential debate last night between President Trump and Vice President Kamala Harris, and my takeaways from that. Initial takeaways were pretty simple. They're always kind of simple, right? We have our instant reaction. I try to give everything a day or two to marinate a little bit and give things a little bit of time to develop. And I know that, about 2.5 years ago, we started saying give everything 48 to 72 hours before you make a decision or invest your emotions. And I will reiterate this saying I've been saying for a long time. This is a psychological war. And in a psychological war, your currency is your emotions, and you should always invest them wisely. So don't let the little things get to you. Don't let little things bother you. Everything happens for a purpose under God's roof, under the firmament. And it is important that we allow God to work in our lives and allow God to do what he's doing in a very, very long, drawn-out battle that we're in right now. So we will be covering just kind of my topics, my notes from the debate last night, and then a little bit about 9/11, because I think that's probably anyone who's under the age of 30 probably won't understand. Anyone over the age of 30, that was a very defining moment in this nation's history, a very defining moment. Rattled a lot of the world to its very, very core, and most of the information out there of who's responsible and who was involved and or who may allegedly be involved is very easy to see. We're going to run through some of that information. We have definitely not been told the real story when it comes to 9/11 at all, nor with any other major event in this country's history. And that's an important part of this podcast. I certainly want to be able to serve different communities. The objective here is always money, politics, and religion, the three things that you're never supposed to talk about ever, happen to be the three most important things in your life besides your family and your faith. And then the fourth area that we try to cover on very specific basis, so today will be a different show than normal, is history. And looking through history, questioning history. History is never to be questioned. History has always been written by the winner. The victor always writes the history manuals and history statements. And most of the time, they are as big a lie as we heard on stage last night at the debate. So let's hop into that. First and foremost, the debate last night, I have a very unique perspective from the debate because it was my wife, myself, and my mother-in-law, Diane. I love her. She's a great person, but she's definitely a liberal, hates Trump. Totally understand that. And it was interesting to see from a different perspective in real time what people thought. Now, I do have liberal friends, kind of, I guess, at this point in time. Again, I'll repeat this a million times over. I am absolutely a conservative, but I'm not a Republican. This Republican Party is no different than the Democrat Party. They just tell different lies and wear different colored ties. I think when they're cleaned up, that you'll see a lot of America looking for a whole new political party and a whole new political system, because the one that we have is broken, and it's not by accident. George Washington told us this as soon as this country was formed, that a two-party state is destined for failure. And that's something we certainly need to keep in the back of our minds as time goes on. But we don't have time to fix that right now. What we have time to do is make the right choice for our votes moving forward. If they count, I will state this. I've stated it almost every episode we talk about the election. I believe they're going to try like hell to steal this election, probably will, and then we'll see what the American people do. Because the last time it happened, 75% of the country didn't, but actually not even that. 85% of the country didn't believe that 2020 was stolen. I would say 65% of the country at least thinks it was stolen, and about 30% know it was stolen. So as those numbers increase over the coming 65 to 70 days, we're certainly going to be in a very volatile time in this country's history, maybe the most volatile since the Revolutionary or Civil War. And it's important to have faith in these times. It's important to walk with God and ignore the ways of the world, because that's the most important thing you're going to do in your entire life. Teach your children about faith. Love your family. That's what's really important. But let's get into the debate. Last night's debate, in my opinion, and this is just my opinion, I'm just a nobody out of nowhere in this room talking to you. My take from the debate last night was that at best, it was a neutral scenario. Now, of course, there are different avenues to think about when it comes to a debate, because I know a lot. So for me, I didn't learn anything new. In fact, I'm kind of bored hearing the same talking points, but that's for me. It doesn't mean people who haven't paid attention to politics since 2020 haven't gotten something from that. They certainly did. Independent polls have shown that since that debate, that it's about 60 to 35 Trump with new voters. Like, as I said in yesterday's episode, that is the purpose of debates. People who are Democrat are going to vote Democrat. People who are Republican are going to vote Republican. It's the ones in the middle that determine all the votes, especially in the electoral college states. And that's really what the most important avenue to take if you're a politician is, to try to get the swing voters, the ones in the middle. And I think Trump did a good job at doing that, sort of. I think that he got off topic quite a bit. I will say this over and over again. I am absolutely tired of watching debates where no one answers a question directly. The proper response in a debate for a university or a trained debater is always to answer the question first and elaborate later. But politicians just elaborate until you almost forget, and sometimes do forget, what the original question asked was. That happened to me, and I have a very good memory. I forgot what the question they were answering was 3 or 4 different times because it just went into a cat scratching contest. Now, of course, people get into the minutia of it. You know, Trump said that they're eating dogs. The reports and the videos that prove that they are eating cats and geese, those are proven through video, police reports, and videos coming from the neighbors. So there's no allusion to that. That's actually happening. There are Haitians here. They do sacrifice animals for voodoo magic and their religion. And they also are accustomed to eating any animal they can catch and kill, because Haiti has no food. Thank you, Hillary Clinton. But the debate itself, the first question was asked to Harris, and it was the most telling part of the debate. I have a couple of friends who turned the debate off after question number 1 because they knew what was going to happen, and they were right. She was asked, are Americans better off now under your administration than they were before? She did not answer that question. Trump did not answer that question. Neither party answered that question, and that's okay, I guess. But I want a direct answer from the people who are in charge of what is happening in this country. Are we better off? The answer is absolutely, unequivocally, no. You could have started with a lie. She lied the whole rest of the time. Matter of fact, the thing that I was most surprised by was how good of a liar Kamala Harris is. I know Gavin Newsom is maybe the world's greatest liar. That man is an incredible liar. If you have no knowledge and no actual research done in your life, you will believe everything Gavin Newsom says. He is that good at it. Now, apparently, Harris has spent enough time with him or trained with him for the last couple of weeks where she could boldface lie just like he did. And I won't get into the lying part because I'm not here to talk about the actualities of the debate. I'm looking at more from the normie perspective, the average person who hasn't paid attention to politics, doesn't understand what's happening in this country, doesn't understand the economy. Yeah, they don't have money, but that's okay because, you know, gay people have rights and people can be transgender, and like, it's okay if you're broke, but they can live the way they want to. There are those people. That's a large portion of our country. And they in every possible poll since that debate, they all agree they didn't get anything from that debate from either candidate. There were no numbers thrown around. It was philosophical. Everything was very vague. I expect that from Democrats. I did not expect that from Trump. Of course, there is the theory, maybe that's the plan, because the ultimate victory of this debate was not that either party won the debate. You could certainly say Trump won the debate because he actually gave information. I agree with that. You could say that Harris won the debate because she triggered Trump into acting angry, which is exactly what they wanted to happen. So you could look at that from that perspective. And to be honest with you, after speaking to so many different Americans from so many different walks of life, there are very few people who take elections seriously. They look at it more as like the who's the president of your class in high school type election. That's the elections that they're used to. They're not used to elections that have actual consequences, like the consequences that we're living through right now. And the way that they view this entire environment is they look at it as a performance art. And from a performance art perspective, who won the debate? I would definitely say that from the left perspective, Kamala Harris shined like a star for them. She gave zero information, gave zero numbers, gave zero intent and zero policy. That doesn't matter to a portion of our country. They just wanted her to make Trump angry and make Trump look bad. And he did a good job at composing himself, as he usually does. And it is angering after being attacked since basically 2015, every moment he's been alive. It's understandable. I support President Trump. I'm going to vote for President Trump 1,000%. But at the same time, I don't think it was effective for his base or for independents. And time will tell on that. That's my opinion. But here's the main takeaways. For me, the main takeaway was obviously didn't answer the question on are Americans better off with you in office? The next really blaring point of view that I'm sure almost every non-educated person noticed was that Trump called her a Marxist and her father a Marxist. She never denied that claim. She never said, well, that's ridiculous. Don't call me a Marxist. She just went right into ripping on him and talking about him being a criminal. And that's by design. So Marxists will never tell you they're Marxists. In fact, Karl Marx has a statement saying, whatever you're doing, blame it on the enemy and continue to tell the lie. And that's exactly what happens. This is what Marxists do. They are trained Marxists. These are not amateur Marxists. These are professional Marxists at the highest level. She did not deny being a Marxist at all. The abortion question, I think, was question number 3. I thought Trump was killing her in the debate until then, because let's be honest about abortion. Abortion is, no matter what way you shape it up, is terminating life. Terminating life voluntarily on purpose is called murder. And terminating the life of a child is no different than that, even if you believe they're just a clump of cells. They are absolutely human beings. There's a flash of light that occurs at the moment of conception, and that is the soul being entered into the physical world. There's a reason women are under attack, because you are the gatekeepers between heaven and earth. That is a known fact. Men cannot bring new souls to earth from heaven. Only women can do that. And they don't want the population to grow, and they do not want nations to thrive or people to be independent. They don't want that. They want a global blended society, which would require women to start terminating new life into the world. Now, when the abortion question came up, Harris lit up like a Christmas tree and honestly dominated that conversation. I was sitting here with a nurse practitioner liberal, and she kept saying, this is the most important topic. I completely disagree, and it's okay if she believes that. It's okay if people believe that. Your belief says this is America. You still have the right to free speech. If you don't agree with someone, you have the right to disagree with them. If you don't agree with me, you have the right to disagree with me. What I believe you don't have the right to do is to support hedonism that produces life and then terminate the life. Now, Trump went into this really heavily, and it was probably skewed in the wrong direction, because he went into saying they want to terminate babies after birth. Technically, that's not true. There are no laws passed for that. However, there are 9 states right now that either have this type of bill on their docket or it is coming to their docket to terminate the life of a child after birth. It's not something they're doing, it's something they want to do. The mere fact that you want to terminate a baby's life after they are born makes you a Satanist performing child sacrifice. That is what abortion truly is for those who live in the spirit and understand what this world really, really is. It's far greater of a world that we live in than concrete buildings, electric vehicles, and funny catchphrases that make sense from a politician to a voter. It's much deeper than that. Our country is the only country in the world that has political arguments over the death of children, abortion. We are the only country in the world that spends this much time, effort, and money terminating birth. These are horrible things for a society. And the question I would ask to anyone who supports abortion, how would Jesus vote? How would Jesus vote on abortion? Do you think he would vote that, yeah, it's your body, your rights, right? Your body, your problem, your body, your whatever. I think he would probably say that's a gift from heaven and should be born into this earth. And if you can't take care of it yourself, there's certainly a family that can't have children. And that number is climbing faster than ever. The mere fact that America is spending this much time arguing over abortion shows the lack of the pure ignorance in this nation behind what's actually happening. Our birth rate in this country is near zero. We are having far less children than we did before. We are having children in other nations, they're having 5-6 children apiece. We are going to depopulate ourselves. Matter of fact, that would be the devil's master plan, would be to have earth depopulate itself and have God's creation destroy itself before God. These are things that people do not talk about, and they certainly do not talk about it in this manner. There is no such thing as reproductive rights that involve destroying or killing another being. A reproductive right is your right to reproduce. If you are not reproducing, that is not reproductive rights. That is termination rights. By definition, words matter. The term reproductive rights would actually apply to IVF, which she accused Trump of not supporting, despite the fact his last 5 speeches have had 2 to 4 minute segments completely dedicated to Americans having babies and the support of IVF. So I want to make that abundantly clear to people and make that very clear in my stance. I am absolutely pro-life. I am absolutely in favor of anything that creates more Americans being born on American soil, because it completely eliminates the conversation behind illegal migration into any nation. This is not an American problem, by the way. It's globally. We are watching nationalists, people born in their country, have less babies, and borders being open to those who multiply like rabbits. So the abortion question, she completely dominated on. The other question that was not... For me, it wasn't the questions that were asked or the questions that were answered. It's the questions that were never asked and the answers that were never given. That was the overwhelming theme behind the debate. There was not a single question from the press about the obscene spending orgy in Washington, D.C. There was not a single question asked to either candidate. We are approaching $36 trillion in debt. Here's a gift for you. That's never going to be paid off. No one is ever going to pay off $36 trillion in debt. That's not going to happen anytime soon or possibly ever. That question was never asked. There was no questions being asked about how much funding is going towards illegal aliens, which is close to $450 billion. So between illegal aliens coming across our border, our open borders cost us $450 billion already. That number will multiply 3 to 4x in the next year and a half, because you now have to house them, take care of them, continue to give them EBT, and all types of other things that are destructive to American culture, society, and a nation, as well as our national security. On the other hand, we are spending $200+ billion on the Ukrainian borders. We have spent at least $22 billion on the Israeli borders, which are already the strongest borders in the world. By far, without question, yet we are sending them money. So let's look at those two things. That's nearing $1 trillion for other people's borders or other people's citizens within our borders. Trump harped on the illegal migration, but it was the same sentence and the same phrase over and over and over again. And we're a nation in decline, all these things. Absolutely true. But President Trump, if you ever happen to come across this podcast, which I highly doubt that you will, I would suggest in your next debate, and I'm not a performance artist person, but that is part of our country that thinks that debates are performance art. How did they do? What did they say? Did they smile? Did they put their hand on their fist? Did they? None of that matters. We're interested in substance and content. And the people who would vote for you, who need to know who you are, need to see you be who you are and answer questions directly first and then elaborate. Answer the enemy's question. Make it simple for them. You know, the question where they asked him about, January 6th was so ridiculous. They brought up every hoax that's been available. And the good part is that some of those middle-of-the-road independent voters watched that and they started to realize, man, this is a 3-on-1 debate. And everyone all day today through social media, YouTube, all this stuff, everyone knows that it's the media and the candidate against Trump. Everyone knows that. Everyone does. But the mere fact of the matter is that eventually people who aren't involved in politics are starting to pay attention to them now. Now is political season. We are going through this 67-day, 66-day cycle where it'll be nothing but a barrage of political ads on television, stuff in your mailbox, text messages, emails, Facebook posts, Twitter ads. It is time to be very clear with the American people and end the vagalities. Get to the point, pull out the blade, and stick it in. Like, that part needs to be done, from my opinion. Now, the good part of this is that everyone could see the bias. Everyone could see the bias that exists on the media and the Democrat sides. What they didn't get to see, I think, is Donald Trump being very clear, period. However, this could be a setup. Everything's a chess game. I'm sorry, guys, got a couple itches today. Everything's a big setup. You want to be able to take a campaign and turn it into a long, crescendo and have the climax come at the perfect time. And I think the best thing that came out of that debate which is the most confusing part, is Trump coming out and immediately doing interviews saying that's the best debate I ever did. I totally disagree, and I think almost every conservative disagrees with that. But as he said that, at the same time, the Harris campaign went over to the Trump campaign and said, let's do round two. So I'm hoping and praying that in round two, we get direct, we get concise, and we get based on numbers. Not just overall sentiment about stuff on the border, people coming over here, get very direct. Now, one of the points I do want to bring up is that kind of how I would respond to things, I think is the best way to put it. When, I forgot the guy's name, when the male moderator said, well, I called the city manager of Springfield, Ohio, and he said none of this existed. And Trump said, of course he'd say that. That's not the response that your average, everyday, uneducated voter is looking for. What he should have said was, oh, you mean the guy whose job is on the line if it is happening lied to you on the phone and said it wasn't? That sounds weird, because everyone in this country has known somebody in a management position that they know have lied to save their job. A city manager should be fired for what's happening in Springfield, Ohio, and that's the absolute only person they called from ABC News. It's absolutely unbelievable that happened. So that's where I'm at with that. I think it's an interesting thing. I think the most interesting thing is that he pointed at Harris last night and said, Biden hates you. And then earlier this morning at a firehouse, I forgot where he was, but Biden was seen, whoever that guy is, he was seen wearing a Trump 2024 hat today. So, there's a lot of political theater that occurs. There's a lot of this stuff is scripted, organized, and ready to go. And then there's a lot of things that are kind of curveballs that come out there. But, at the end of the day, we can hypothesize and we can speculate of what Trump and his team are doing all we like till we're blue in the face. But the fact of the matter is, without the support of the majority of the American people, changes will never be made. Consensus is a big term. It's one of the big terms that brought me over to Bitcoin, is that consensus voting is the only way to change that platform. Consensus is almost impossible to achieve in a political season. At best, races are won by 1 or 2%. This particular race needs to be a landslide, because I believe they're going to steal it, and I believe we're going to have to shut down the country to get a recount and get it all done. That's just what I believe. I'm not saying that's going to happen. That's just what game theory tells me moving forward, looking at the situation at hand. So that's all I'm going to cover for the debate, because I want to make this episode very quick and very to the point today, and hopefully shareable in some capacity. I am on TikTok now. I will let you know that. Let me pull up my TikTok address if you're interested, if you're on TikTok. I don't run the account because I won't let TikTok have access to my phone. But thankfully, I've got a bunch of friends that help me out with this stuff. My TikTok account is The Rice Report, at The Rice Report, if you're interested in following me on TikTok. Some of these clips from this video will be on there, and some of the other ones. We've got a great production team that does some YouTube shorts and makes everything very interesting and digestible, under a minute videos. Hopefully they're shareable. Now, today is a 23-year anniversary of 9/11. 9/11, first and foremost, my prayers, my heart is broken for the families who are lost. I know 2 people who died in Tower 1 personally. I have many friends in New York City who've told me many different tales. I've been researching this literally since probably 2011, part-time, and really digging into it since 2018 with what limited free time I have. And the story has become more confusing over time. Now, the simple fact of the matter is that day will live in infamy forever throughout this nation. 2,996 people lost their lives in the blink of an eye. But there are so many parts to this story that don't make sense. The thing that makes the least sense to me is the fact that no one in this country questions the main narrative. 9/11 by itself was a horrible, tragic day. 9/12, which happens to be my wife's birthday, 9/12 was one of the best days I've ever experienced as an American, and I will restate that time and time again. I've never felt more patriotic. Our military numbers doubled, quadrupled, and we were misled. We were led into a war that ultimately cost 1.3 million Iraqis their life too, over weapons of mass destruction that did not exist. These are facts. So what I'm going to do here for the next few minutes about 9/11 is to try to summarize it as best I can, because I'm not trying to be known as a conspiracy theorist, though I actually am. I'm certainly not trying to scare people away by sounding too lunatic all the time. I know a lot of things I don't share, and I share them right at the perfect time, in my opinion. And 9/11 is one of those things that you really can't get away from observing the facts if you spent enough time. So I used to explain 9/11 to people this way. I actually have a video that my team said don't release because people think you're a conspiracy theorist. But what I did a couple weeks ago, actually about a month ago, is I started putting conspiracy theories into 2-minute videos. And they're just simple facts and questions that need to be answered. I can theorize all day long. My theories don't matter. What does matter is the facts and your theories. More importantly, what matters when it comes to 9/11 is the fact that we've had no closure to that event. Now, I know we were told that a bunch of goat herders in the Middle East flew over to America and they learned how to fly single-engine Cessnas, and all of a sudden they could manage the gears of, a 757, 747, and they flew with incredible military precision. And it was a horrible, tragic day. No one saw it coming, and we should never forget Tower 1 and Tower 2. But they certainly tell us to forget Tower 7, and they certainly tell us to never question the Pentagon or the planes that crashed in cornfields. So I'm going to do my very best to be chronological. Now, the way I used to do it is as follows. On September 10th, Donald Rumsfeld came out in a press conference and said that America couldn't follow or couldn't find $2.3 trillion worth of transactions. That's a fact. The very next day, a plane hits Tower 1. The news focuses on it as they should. And then a little while later, a plane hits Tower 2. And then a few minutes after that, a plane hits the Pentagon. And then 7 hours later, a third building in New York collapses straight down after the other two collapsed straight down, though being struck from the side. They all three fell straight down like a controlled demolition. And then all of a sudden, no one cared about the $2.3 trillion. That's the way I used to explain 9/11, and it should be adequate for people to question the narrative coming from the mainstream media and our government itself. But let's get a little bit more detailed, since today is 9/11, and I would love the families of the 9,996 people who died to be honored with some moniker of truth. I would also like to honor the 1.3 million Iraqis who died when we invaded there immediately afterward for no apparent reason, for their lives to be honored by some sort of truth. So let's add into that basic condensed summary and begin in 1995. In 1995, on, I believe, CBS, Benjamin Netanyahu was talking about a book that he wrote. In his book, he stated that if America didn't fully begin to understand militant Islam, which I've studied more than any civilian you will find, if we didn't understand militant Islam, then ultimately the World Trade Centers would come down. That's in 1995. I can give you 1,000 videos of rabbis telling you the same thing because it's prophecy from the Zohar. There is a man named bin Laden, and there are 2 towers that would fall. Now, a few years later, it becomes 2001. 1 month before 9/11, a gentleman named Larry Silverstein, he ends up negotiating the greatest 2 deals in American business history. Larry Silverstein was the only person they called when they decided to privatize the World Trade Centers. They used to be public buildings, but they wanted to sell them for a profit to a private profiteer named Larry Silverstein. Now, Larry is a very sophisticated businessman, so he negotiated a great terms on the building, purchased Tower 1, Tower 2, the World Trade Centers, and immediately began working on an insurance policy that has never existed in United States history. He designed his own insurance company for a commercial building to cover terrorist activity. This had never been done in the United States, and by the way, at that point in time, terrorism wasn't anything that people talked about on a regular basis. We certainly mentioned it. I'm from Chicago. I remember in the 80s, people talking about the O'Rourkens and the street gangs having suitcase nukes. I remember all that stuff. But that kind of faded away for years. We, of course, had the original attempt at bringing down the World Trade Center. That was blamed on the Middle East. But Larry Silverstein negotiates a 99-year lease with the city of New York, the state of New York, to own the World Trade Centers to profit from the rents. Not a bad thing. He begins to organize his own insurance policy. This insurance policy is a 2x insurance policy, meaning that on an act of terror, he would get paid twice the amount he paid for the buildings. So he negotiates this, and it was such a difficult contract to create because it had never been done before. He had to pull together 25 different lenders to be able to cover the insurance that he was going to pay for. Now, you would think that Larry was kind of a sucker and that, ultimately he would pay for 2x coverage on your property. That has to be really expensive in premiums. Luckily for Mr. Silverstein, A month later, 2 planes took out his buildings, and then he went through a short court battle, to be honest with you, very short court battle, where he was paid 2 times the amount, or $4.5 billion, which is to date the largest insurance payout in the history of the world. That's literally like Nancy Pelosi doing real estate. By the way, Larry Silverstein still roams the earth. He's still alive and healthy, and no one's ever really questioned him about this afterward. Now, if you or I bought a building, negotiated a brand new type of insurance, and then all of a sudden that random insurance rider that we put in there was exercised within 30 days, we would probably be in jail until our hearing to figure out if we were a criminal who organized this whole thing or allowed it to happen or had any information about it. But Larry Silverstein is still walking the earth today. To make Mr. Silverstein even luckier in the eyes of the community, for many, many years, he was well known like clockwork that Larry every day went to the 91st floor of the World Trade Center to have breakfast, every day like clockwork. I had friends that worked at Cantor Fitzgerald. I was actually talking to them at that time. And they, years later, when I talked to one of them, I said, is that true what they said about Larry Silverstein and breakfast? They're like, oh, I didn't know him, but yeah, you'd see him up there every morning, early in the morning, having breakfast before he got back to his real estate business. But Mr. Silverstein, on that fateful day of 9/11, he actually, his wife, organized an emergency dermatology appointment. Now he stated in a press conference that he is fair-skinned and fair-haired, and that the sun really bothers him, and he had some sort of a mark on his face that he just had to get checked out. So here's a guy who went to work every day. He went to have breakfast on the 91st floor, just organized his own insurance policy that includes a terrorist rider, which had never existed. In fact, it never existed so much that 25 different lenders had to pool their money together to be able to afford the insurance policy to begin with, who all of a sudden had a medical emergency. On top of this, through a private chat app, 4,000 people of Israeli descent were given a message 2 hours before the first plane hit towers that they should not go to work today. These are facts that have been proven by people. These are just facts. I'm not making an accusation, and I'm certainly not philosophizing. I'm regurgitating facts that have been proven over the last 23 years. So Donald Rumsfeld, in the middle of all this, he's the one who came out and said on September 10th, the government cannot locate $2.3 trillion worth of spending, and we are missing this. So, of course, like any good accountant would do, the budget analyst department at the Pentagon began researching where in the heck this $2.3 trillion could go. Now, as the story is told to us, an unskilled goat herder from the Middle East who had done about 2 months of training on a single engine Cessna was able to make a military precision right-hand turn at over 4,000 feet above the surface and land his plane directly into the budget analyst office at the Pentagon. Now, that's a tall tale to begin with right there, total conspiracy theory. How could that happen? But on top of it, to make things more interesting, number one, it was a precise, the impact point of the airplane at the Pentagon was so precise, it was actually right through the wall of the budget analyst office. Now, as this happened and unfolded on 9/11, a CNN reporter, maybe the last time CNN ever told the truth, was standing in front of the Pentagon and simply said, "We've been searching for hours and we cannot find any airplane parts." These are facts. This is all happening. So Tower 1, Tower 2, at this point, Tower 1 is about to collapse. And by the way, it collapsed straight down. If you've ever watched a video or been to Las Vegas to see a casino destroyed, they don't fall to the sides. They fall right on top of themselves, which Tower 1 and Tower 2 had begun to do. Now, as this is happening, people are coming out on the street as they leave the buildings, and they're giving all types of reports to journalists, independent journalists, random people on the street, people with video cameras, tourists that were watching. Where did all this footage go? There's about 200 videos that I've seen in the past decade, but it's New York City in the middle of the day, early in the day, when tourists are out looking at everything. They're all near Tower 1 and Tower 2. I've been to the memorial in New York City. New York City until 4 years ago used to be my favorite place in this country. And I've been there many, many times, and any given time, with the exception of COVID, which I was there when COVID started, you can see tens of thousands of people on the street, and probably 50% of them have their camera, their phone out, and even back in the early 2000s, they all had handy cams that they were holding, filming things, especially foreigners. They want to film all they can about New York. Now, they were reporting multiple explosions and detonations within these buildings, which is very consistent with a controlled demolition of a building. That's just a fact. In fact, As Tower 7 fell, which was 1,600 feet away from the nearest tower that collapsed, hours later, 7 hours after impact, it wasn't impacted by anything. Nothing hit Tower 7. Now, Tower 7 had a CIA office, a DIA office, and an FBI office. It also had a cache of gold in the basement. These are verifiable facts. A gentleman named Barry Jennings, who no one's really ever heard of. Barry Jennings was the Deputy Director of Emergency Services for the New York City Housing Authority. He was in Tower 7 when he began to hear multiple explosions. He told that to the news, he gave interviews, and we still don't know the cause of his death. He died about a year later, and no one knows from what or how. Now, Barry Jennings, his story is very consistent with a controlled demolition. He heard multiple explosions from far away that got closer and closer. He literally stepped over dead bodies to get out of the building as it collapsed. Now, the official story on this is that there was an office fire that took down Building 7, which every single engineer in the world will debunk in 2 seconds. Steel does not burn, fires do not burn hot enough to collapse steel, and all of these buildings were built to withstand the impact of a 747. Now, as this is happening, there are also now 5 men who've been arrested from Israel. They're called the Dancing Israelis. Go ahead and research it for yourself. The Dancing Israelis are taking pictures and photos and watching the buildings collapse almost as if they knew it was going to happen. There were also 4 gentlemen on the Washington Bridge who were pulled over, accosted, and arrested. All 4 from Israel. 2 of the 4 are verified Mossad agents. And then throughout the rest of the country, there were 5 other cities that reported Israelis with Mossad ties that were arrested, and some of them were held in incarceration for 71 days at maximum. They were questioned by authorities. All of the evidence of their conversations has been destroyed. All of them were sent back to Israel. Not a single one of them was ever arrested, tried, or charged. Ever. These are facts of the case. I won't get into the names and details because I'm not trying to make a 6-hour video. And to be quite honest with you, most of what I know comes from other researchers in this area. And everyone in America should get curious. Now, there are certainly some way out there things, but everyone should be curious about this because we lost almost 3,000 lives that day. We had a market crash that came. And by the way, the entire TV show Billions is built off a guy who's a real story. Now, his real name isn't Bobby Axelrod, but there were certainly traders who made billions of dollars shorting the market and at market open, which minutes later is when the planes hit. They hadn't shorted the market in months. Since then, we have seen nothing but delays, conflict of interest. It's for public safety. We've gotten no disclosure on any of the interviews of any of these Israelis, any of the suspected terrorists. We have not gotten an interview transcript from Bush or Cheney, who were actually interviewed behind closed doors, not under oath, and on their own volition. We have no idea what they said. What we do know is that FEMA and multiple other places had many different intel cables tell them that it was a very strong possibility that terrorists would use a plane to take down the World Trade Centers, and no one did a darn thing about it for years. We knew years and years in advance. Now, it is very interesting to me that after 9/11, the things that have happened, 9/11 itself, you can think of as a conspiracy theory all you'd like. And I don't care if you make fun of me or call me names. I'm giving you the facts. Everything in here is non-conjecture. Everything I'm telling you can be proven, including the aftermath, which tells you more about a story than the actual story itself. The aftermath of 9/11 was nothing but delays, conflicts of interest, all these other things. The testimony of everyone has been destroyed. The Israelis, the terrorists, the politicians, the bankers, and the traders who profited. All of their testimonies have been completely destroyed. The DEI, the Department of Military Insurance, Intelligence, they actually deleted 2.5 terabytes of data. Terabytes. Not gigabytes, megabytes. These are terabytes. That's a massive file. The SEC destroyed all of their evidence of insider trading, and we still have all of these files that are held in classified environments, or they're considered to be harmful to national security. Now, I don't know what is more harmful to national security, the things you know or the things you don't know, but I would rather know things to feel safe than not know them. That's my own personal opinion. And for the record, I would say that that's the opinion of 85% of grown adults and 100% of grown adults with a good head screwed on their shoulders. I want to know the truth. This country wants to know the truth. This story could literally go on with more facts for the next 6.5 hours. I literally could sit here and talk about all the facts of 9/11 without giving you any. I haven't given you any of my theory at all. I have given you nothing but facts about 9/11. And the fact that people still don't question this, and the fact that when you did question it in 2010, 2011, everyone made fun of you, including Tucker Carlson, who now, after doing the research, has come out and said, I believe it was an inside job. You have to look at what happened afterwards. So, of course, all the evidence is destroyed. Everything is still classified. So then we went on a manhunt for a guy who was on dialysis living in the mountains. That's Osama bin Laden. Osama bin Laden, 20 years previous, it is a verifiable fact, was a CIA asset. The CIA paid bin Laden to do whatever they paid him to do. I don't know what they paid him to do, but I know that he was on the CIA payroll as an asset 20 years before 9/11. At the same time, our government said this must have been Iraq. Iraq had nothing to do with it. 9/11 led to 1.3 million Iraqis dying in Iraq, trying to find weapons of mass destruction that did not exist. These are irrefutable facts. I don't care who you are or where you're from or what you believe. These are irrefutable facts that all need to be understood. In fact, it gets worse. So after a decade and a half of looking for bin Laden throughout the mountains of Afghanistan and Islamabad and all these other places around the world, we have the greatest military intelligence. By the way, these guys flew planes into the highest military budget in the world and no one stopped them. They were flying around for an hour before they hit the buildings, and not a single fighter pilot ever accosted them or rode next to them or took down the planes. That's number one. We have the most sophisticated military equipment in the world at that time, and it took us over a decade to find a guy on dialysis who's 6'5", one of the tallest guys in the Middle East. It took us forever to find him, the most wanted man in the world. And when we finally found him, we sent in SEAL Team 6 to kill him. And they killed him without body. For some reason, their body cameras didn't work that day. I don't know, just kind of a glitch. Military, they're sloppy, right? They're trained to be sloppy. They're not trained to be precise and effective, which is the reality. I'm being sarcastic. But after they shot and killed him, they took him back to America on a boat. They did not fly him home. Apparently, 0 people on SEAL Team 6 had a cell phone with a camera or a camera itself. None of their body cams worked. None of their night vision cameras worked. Nothing worked. But they tell us they killed him. And then on the way home, they dumped his body in the ocean because they were so disgusted with him. So we've still never seen Osama bin Laden's body. But what we did see is Barack Obama go on television and take credit for the killing of someone he can never prove that they actually killed, which leads to his legacy of being a traitor to this nation. That pretty much sums it up, except for the fact that a couple years later, half of SEAL Team 6 was killed in a helicopter crash in Afghanistan. And then we saw Benghazi and many other things to get rid of. There's an old mafia saying, no witness, no crime. So we don't have any witnesses left. Barry Jennings is gone. SEAL Team 6 is gone. All the evidence that has been destroyed of any conversation of 9/11. And to be honest with you, this horrific act, which, by the way, note to self and to YouTube, I have still not made put together a theory or made an accusation. I've simply stated facts. And I think these facts are worth looking into forever. I think that everything from 2001 to today has been built upon the fear of questioning the main narrative. I think it has silenced Americans in a way that they should have never been silenced. I think it has created fear and cowardice throughout this entire nation. And I think it is causing anger now that we still don't know. In fact, the people they said did it went to Gitmo. And while they were in Gitmo, they confessed after being tortured. They were tortured so badly that we began to have lawyers, civil rights lawyers, suing our own government for their interrogation tactics, which are waterboarding. Waterboarding was a big term for a long time, and people forgot. The only guys who confessed are the guys who were waterboarded for 5 consecutive days while they were strung up naked from chains listening to awful music. That torture will get you to admit anything. The real narrative of this, I'm not making an accusation. I just find it strange that at this time there were 0 actual Middle Easterners or Muslims that were in America dancing, but there certainly were Israelis. I find it interesting that not a single terrorist from the Middle East was arrested on U.S. soil that day, but there were multiple Israelis in multiple cities around this country who had been under investigation for spying on the U.S. government and U.S. citizens, as well as terrorists on our soil. That was the excuse. Oh, we're here to investigate these terrorists, but they were spying on us. Fox News covered that for about 4 days in 2001. And that story went away faster than the Trump assassination or the Vegas shooting. Both of those two things we need details on as well. I think that if we look at 9/11 from the right perspective, number one, we should be still mourning the loss of innocent life. There's no way around that. We should be very much on our toes about things that happen here. This place is not as safe as they tell us. I think that we should also be in complete remembrance of the soldiers who fought valiantly for a war that should have never been fought. It's not their fault that they were sent to Iraq to kill people for a war that should have never been ever fought. And I think more importantly, we should take 9/11 with a bit of anger, a little bit of pill of bitterness behind those who control the levers of power around the world and the information sources that we readily depend upon, who have not given even an inch of real information about that event. We should also be thinking about 9/11 in a certain pathway. I think it was Jesse Ventura who put a video out in 2008 or 2009, and he was being interviewed by, I forget the guy's name, the British guy that no one likes, and Piers Morgan. And he told Piers Morgan pretty point blank, he's like, listen, every war begins with a false flag. Every war, that is factually true. You can look at World War I. The false flag was some random drunken failure Serbian found his way into Austria and killed Prince Ferdinand. Or World War II, that the Germans just invaded Poland. They couldn't wait to take over the world, despite the fact that Bolsheviks in Poland were slaughtering people of German descent by the thousands per day. And there's more than enough documentation in the world to prove that accusation. We are now seeing another war that started in Israel in the same way. You're telling me that a bunch of guys on hang gliders and motorcycles penetrated the world's greatest wall defense? I'm not buying it. This is not I'm not accusing the people of Israel of anything. I'm accusing the corrupt government of Israel of being corrupt, and being corrupt for a very long time at the expense of Americans, while lying to our face about being the world's our greatest ally. Our greatest ally wouldn't even have accusations of spying. They wouldn't have accusations of art students from Israel who were actually Mossad agents that had free reign in the top towers of the World Trade Center. There wouldn't be accusations about people arrested on the Washington Bridge that are provably Mossad agents with a car full of detonators and explosive devices. There wouldn't be any accusations about an Israeli driving a moving van that had a mural painted on the side of 2 towers and a plane flying into it on 9/11, which means it had to have been painted at the very latest the night before. These are questions that need to be answered. The American society is treated like children who haven't been brought up properly, children that are sheltered. There's a reason they want parents to be helicopter parents. There's a reason the state wants to manage your children, because the entire generation that was born after 9/11 will never understand the pain in our heart, the anger in our heart over that time period. And as time moves on, the pain from the deception from our own government and our greatest ally that caused the largest mass casualty in U.S. history. That pain will never go away for those of us who lived during that time, and the least thing that we want in return is answers as to what happened. I don't think we're asking too much. I don't think that we are running out of time either. I think that the time is approaching. I think that the time is definitely approaching. Whoever wants to win this next presidential candidate would be the first one that says, I'm going to do full disclosure on 9/11. And then you just have to survive the election and have really good security, because every person that I list, and I have a list that I can pull up of 400 people at minimum who told the truth about 9/11, all 400 of them are now in heaven. They are no longer with us. It's no different from the people who talked about multiple shooters in the Las Vegas shooting. 6 of them met up at a bar in Northern California to talk about what happened at that concert. And just out of all the bars in America, all the bars throughout this entire country, a madman came in shooting everyone in sight, happened to kill all 6 of them and 1 other person, but the other 52 people in that bar were untouched. This is the true story of the things that have happened since the year 2000 and well beyond that. We are in this position from world events that stem all the way back to 1871 that have never been cut off by anyone good of any stature in any political position in this country. In my lifetime, with the exception of Trump so far, I have not seen anyone in any political office make any significant impact in American life in any possible way. I don't want to hear about tax cuts. Taxes are illegal. I don't want to hear about it. They're illegal constitutionally. I want to hear about the elimination of taxes. I love hearing about tariffs on foreign imports to pay for what the government needs. I want to hear about a downsizing of the government. I want to hear about a nation that stands together and allows the Bible to be taught in school. Your kid doesn't have to learn it, just like, that's the same exact response you get from the other side. Well, there's a BLM flag. I want it down. Well, your kid doesn't have to look at it. Well, you don't have to pay attention to the Bible, but I certainly want it in schools. I want an end to abortion in this country. I don't want to appease voters on that. We are the only nation in the world that fights and funds deception to kill babies. These are the topics that matter to the conservative Americans, which unfortunately at this point in time are completely 100% going to vote for Trump. So we can't hold him to the coals. And I know that during this election, he has to find the middle road. And that's what's going to make the evangelicals difficult, because the truth about Israel will completely conflict with the Schofield Bible teachings and the nation of Israel. So this is a very difficult time in U.S. history, on a very difficult day in U.S. history. And as we wrap this up and go into Q&A, I just want to say that if you're watching this show, thank you. If you paid attention to me online for years, thank you. I've gotten so many nice things in DMs. And if you're part of my prayer group on Telegram, thank you. God bless all of you. We are in this together as one country, one nation. No politician is going to save us and change the world. It's actually contrary to their political office, no matter who they are. No single individual beyond Jesus Christ returning back to earth is going to change the minds and hearts of Americans. That's up to us. We've got to live better lives. We've got to tell the truth. We've got to get transparency. We've got to be better parents, brothers, sisters, husbands, wives, neighbors, community members, friends, volunteers. We've got to take it upon ourselves to change the entire scope of society. Our society is sick. Our society, much of our society, is under possession. They have lost their way. They don't understand what a good life is. They only understand what sin is. Most American kids can't wait to go to college so they can get drunk without their parents being there. It's not about education. This is not an educational problem. This is a problem societally that stems from the home and extends all the way out. We have bigger problems than conspiracy theories. We have bigger problems than money. We have bigger problems than you can possibly imagine, and they stem from a lack of faith, a lack of purpose on earth. This time, this day, September 11th, I'm actually doing this podcast. I normally do a men's ministry at my home, and sorry guys if you're watching this. I got pushed back. A lot of busy things happening right now. A lot of good things happening in life. We have to take days like this to reflect on what has happened so that we can change what will happen in the future. And if America doesn't come together and unite, put down your donkeys and your elephants. Put them down. Your political party doesn't matter. Your religious affiliation doesn't matter right now. It doesn't matter. We need to come together as an American people and demand truth and transparency from our government. Period. They work for us. And if something happens in this election, and this election is stolen, blatantly, obviously stolen, which I believe it will be, this country needs to come together and unite and stop going to work, stop paying taxes, stop adhering, stop funding the enemy. We need to shut it down and demand that they make changes, a new negotiation, a new contract between the American people and the American government that does not rely upon their whims, but ours. They need our consent, the consent of the governed. I do not consent to anything that has happened from the government from the moment of my birth. And I hope none of you do too. I hope that all of you take time to reflect on this, sad day in American history and sit back and get a little bit angry about the fact that this country was born in the fact that the government works for us to make our lives better. I have never lived in that. From the moment of my birth, I have seen and been taught that we work for the government and we just have to do what they tell us to do. That's not how it works. God created sovereignty. A sovereign being created sovereignty, and the devil created tyranny to stop it. That's a simple, philosophical, spiritual fact. And I hope and pray for all of you and your families that you take tonight, that you take time to remember September 11th, that you take time to educate the next generation of people coming up, that you have real conversations with people. Stop talking about how you bought your house or your dog or your kid or all the small talk that happens in this world. That's also political correctness. As I've stated many times, the path to genocide is a three-part plan. Political correctness, then you get into censorship, and then you go to genocide. We are in that second phase, period. Without massive change in this country, we are going to experience things and horrors that you could have never imagined in your ever in your life. But you'll be desensitized to them because the content we consume predicts it for us. We can see what the future is. All we have to do is watch movies about what's coming next. They're telling us. We all have to make a change. We've got to be better. We've got to be better as people. We've got to be better as friends, brothers, parents, spouses. You know, I just hope and pray that on this September 11th, that people take a good look back at the debate that happened yesterday, remember the events of 9/11, and begin to ask the questions that actually matter. Because they weren't asked in that debate. They're never asked on a grand scale in front for September 11th, ever. I've yet to see, the only people I've ever seen, and I follow quite a bit of them, that question 9/11 have been censored and banned from everywhere they've ever been to, especially those who bring up the fact that Israeli Mossad agents were all over this country with explosives in cars. That's a known fact. There are police reports that document this and interviews from the sheriffs who arrested them. Most of them are also dead. So I think that if we look at this from the right perspective, guys, I think that we have a very short period of time. We're late in the fourth quarter. We've got to drive the ball all the way down the field in a quick manner, score a touchdown, and get a good one for the good guys. That's where we are. There's no other way to think about it. The election, though I do think it'll be rigged, I'm going to vote. I don't think our vote counts, but I'm going to vote. That's my duty. That's my job. That's what every citizen should do. That's what people fought for a long time, the right to vote. Will it matter? It's not up to me. That's not up to me to decide. It's not. I'm going to harbor my money. I'm going to put my money into hard assets. I'm going to put my money into digital, unconfiscatable, uncensorable assets. I'm going to make sure that my family learns from the errors of the past, both from my life and from history. I don't care if people make fun of them. I don't care if people make fun of me. I want to know the truth, and I've spent a significant portion of my life researching the truth, and I'm really excited to, after the election, start getting into history. Because if you understand history, you understand how it repeats itself. And Jesse Ventura, like him or not, I mean, no, he just endorsed terrorists, but I think that's part of a much larger information war game. However, he did say every war, and he was right, every war in the world starts with a false flag event, an intended bad act of violence that specifically ignites the violent nature of the attacked party so that they counterattacked against a targeted enemy. This has been happening in the Middle East for a very long time. This is now happening in America, and we'll probably see it happen again. So let's go ahead and wrap it up for today and see if you got any questions or anything I can help you guys out with here on the chat. I know it's a little early. We don't have much. Doesn't look like we have many questions today. So I am going to just go ahead and wrap this up and get back to my family and practice what I preach. So again, I hope all of you just have a wonderful dinner with your family. I hope you enjoy the evening with your family. I hope that on 9/11 you talk about the things that I mentioned, because this paper is two-sided and I can look through it all day long. I just kind of bullet pointed the important things. There are far more questions than answers from that event, far more questions than answers from every major event in U.S. history, and we need and should demand these answers, especially during an election season. So until next time, this is the Rice Report. My name is Eric Rice. Thank you so much for coming by today. I really appreciate you being here. God bless you all. God bless this nation, and we'll see you next time. Have a good night, everyone.